So this is Houston and its most iconic natural feature, the bayous. There are 2,500 miles of bayous in Houston, and they've, since the beginning of the city, have been one of its defining characters. In fact, in a city plan from the early 1900s, a landscape architect named Arthur Comey envisioned a network of trails and parkways along the bayous that would use part of its floodplain to serve as recreation purpose for the city. So this was all fine and good until 1935, a big flood came and plans changed. So instead, Houston decided to improve the bayous. So they straightened them and widened them and channelized them and engineered them and removed any obstacles or porous surface that could keep the water from getting to the Gulf of Mexico as fast as possible. But Houston's also really flat, so when there's these big storms come and a lot of water gets there really fast, they tend to get backed up. So what they should have engineered is a sponge. A sponge has a lot of nooks and crannies that can obstruct and absorb and hold on to the water, and then when it gets super saturated, release it back into the waterway just a little bit at a time and prevent some of the backups further downstream. A channel works great in the average years of flooding, but in the uncommon years, it starts to break down a little bit. In 10-year floods or 100-year floods, like in 1935 or in 2001, when Tropical Storm Allison flooded more than 75,000 homes and 27 people died from drowning. But cities like Houston that have most of its developed, or at least a lot of its development in the flood zone, they have more than an engineering problem. They have a PR problem. And this is because the term 100-year flood is really misleading. To the average person, that means that there's 100 years in between events, and that does not sound that risky. So planners who look at maps for a living don't have this problem, but the other people look at this and that's really confusing. It doesn't make any sense at all, and it's not even readily available. So out of sight, out of mind. The one thing that isn't out of sight or isn't invisible is the water levels. Even after a flood goes away, all the stuff that's floating in the water is deposited along the shores at the elevation of the flood. It's called the debris line, and this was the inspiration for Matt Baumgarten. Matt is a landscape architect in Houston's SWA Group's Houston office, and he was supposed to be presenting this today, except he and his wife had something more important come up. So I've been invited to speak instead. And he and his colleagues have designed some of the best public spaces in Houston. And outside of their projects, they are also very active in advocating for bayou and floodplain related issues. And so his idea is to bring the 100-year floodplain to life, and to do this in a way that is non-threatening and non-harmful. And in going a lot faster than I planned on being. So I've partnered with SWA Group to organize and promote 2 events this fall. The first of the events is a 1-month art installation along the White Oak Bayou, and we're going to articulate the 100-year flood line along the parkways, and then as it goes into the neighborhoods, when it starts to wander onto the the private residences and property, we had to figure out a way to show the line in a way that shows the gravity of it, that gives the sense of how dangerous these spaces really are. So we're using the vertical elements like trees and light posts and signs, and we're using tree flags to tie on these posts and point out the depth of the water so that people can see how far underwater these houses and businesses and spaces really are. And that this will actually happen. These are not just like a what-if scenario. In the high traffic areas, we're using chalk to mark the line itself. Chalk is actually meant to draw the fond memories of the pollen coating of everything on Houston after the springtime rains. But the centerpiece of this event is really involving the garbage and the bottles that we collect from the bayous themselves. We're going to string together pieces of garbage and make an SWA-made debris line and pin approximately 1 mile of trash to the flood line itself through the parks and the open spaces of the site. We're also going to be telling our story to as many people as we can find that are willing to listen to it. That includes the press, onlookers, passersby, anyone who's even remotely interested as to why we're attaching trash to the ground. And hopefully they will bring this flood line to life when the next time a storm brews. The next event that we're doing is called Flash Flood, and the reason why we named it that is because we wanted to convey the unexpected nature of a flood, of the 100-year flood. And we're targeting young people because we think that kids, once they've learned something, they'll take it home and they'll teach it to their families as well. So this is a two-part event. The first part is an indoor part, and we're going to be presenting at 7 different public schools around the White Oak Bayou area. This is K through 12. We'll be telling them not only about the floodplains and how that's a natural infrastructure of the area, but also about how they can be part of an engineered sponge by using, incorporating rain barrels and swales and permeable surfaces at home, and how collectively these little pieces can actually affect the way that stormwater is managed and reduce some of the flood risks. The second part of the event is an outdoor event, is the outdoor piece, and we're going to be inviting all of the students to come with us and meet in the park and walk a 2-mile stretch of the 100-year flood line. We've also want to invite their families and the public to join as well. So we're using social media to start to develop relationships with other individuals and organizations that share our interests in the bayous and the floodplains, and hopefully that they'll come back out and they'll help to share the message that this is actually a really dangerous place to be, and just to be aware of why it's so dangerous. So if you're interested in following along with us, you can find us on SWA Group's Bayou by Us blog. We're also on Twitter at Bayou by Us, and Matt and my email addresses are here if you're interested in asking us any questions. Thanks.
Ah, yes, the old show 'em a baby picture trick. We've seen that one before. We've seen that one. Now, I am really getting concerned here about the fact that these people are so organized that we're not going to get that CM credit in. But then I started to think, oh, if these guys were ethical AICP planners, they'd be next door. So we're probably safe. All right, our next speaker is Carl Almgren, who works for the City of Spokane, Washington in the environmental program and is also a second-year graduate student at Eastern Washington University.